Bruce, welcome. Thank you for the time. And before we get into Asylum, this is the first time that I'm speaking to you publicly since the passing of your brother, Bob. So my condolences once again. And how have you and the family been holding up?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Eddie. And thanks for the condolences. Well, I got to be honest, it was really hard in the beginning. It was such a shock, and it was emotionally and physically painful. I'm a very, I don't know, it could be because I play guitar, so a lot of emotions are tied to my fingers and hands and things. And I just, and obviously there was so much to do because I had to, basically deal with going to his home and dealing with everything that happens when a loved one passes. But I just was so overwhelmed with sadness and difficulty, and it was really everyone gave me space, which is what I needed, and I went dark on the internet for a month, because I was just overwhelmed both with everything that had to be done and then just the emotional turmoil for it. Fortunately, I have my wife Lisa, who's always supportive, and the fans. Those times that I did make a statement and explain a little bit, like, all right, there's not going to be a memorial yet and things like that. The reaction, though, has been so supportive, and they showed so much love for Bob, which is very ironic that I think he's gotten more kind of that adoring factor from the fans than he maybe ever knew existed, and the outpouring was tremendous. So it certainly made me feel better that they were so they're really going to miss him, and they really do want to celebrate everything that he accomplished, which is my goal moving forward from this loss. So it was tough times, though, on top of a very hard year, Eddie. You know that, for everybody in the music industry.
Yeah, no doubt. It really was. And the whole year has just been, I can't remember a year like this in my lifetime, on so many levels, on so many different things going on, from artists we've lost to the pandemic to the unrest that's going on to everything. I mean, it just seems to be one thing after another. And the good news is we're in September, so hoping a new year brings some change on a lot of fronts, because it's just been absolutely brutal. And, of course, we want to get everybody back out there doing shows, and I'm sure you're itching to get back out with Grand Funk and all the things that you do.
Yeah, and you know as well as I do, speaking this week, nobody really knows exactly how or when. So that's why what I like to do, which is where you heard from me, I'm my own publicist too. I was kind of like, wow, I couldn't wait. I mean, I have some very, very dear friends who are big Kiss fans who give me lots of information and tips and things about Kiss, because let's face it, it's just one of those groups that if you're into it, you might know so many details and everything. And knowing that, I knew probably about 6 months ago that a big anniversary was coming up with the release of the Asylum LP, September 16th. So I always have to think at least a week ahead and think about, well, how do I want to talk about this online? Who would I like to speak to? Hence me reaching out to you. And these anniversaries, this is my silver lining to a very bad year, okay, is celebrating the things that I've accomplished, reaching out to my fans. And I've never been the trash talker or the critical guy anyway. I've always tried to take the high road about everything. But when it comes to my Kiss years, why would I in any way be negative? Obviously, I want to tell the truth and share certain things the way I saw it. But this album's gotten a tremendous amount of love and respect. And it was interesting to hear your take on it. So it's time to everybody do something positive, like enjoy an anniversary, a real anniversary, not the 32nd or the 19th.
Right. That's always been my thing.
Anniversary.
Yeah, I like to talk about things when they're landmark anniversaries, and 35 years is really interesting. I'm glad you called it to my attention, because so many records that I love, they don't feel that old, and then when you realize, you're like, where the hell did the time go? So let's jump in on this, Bruce, with the time that we have, because obviously a really pivotal record for you in your career. You for people that don't know the timeline, you had started playing live with Kiss the previous tour for the Animalize Tour. I saw many of those shows. At that time, Mark St. John was injured, couldn't perform. You were sort of like a fill-in guy, ultimately getting the job. But before we get to Asylum, let me just ask you, Your first experience with Kiss is Animalize and is doing that tour. And what was that situation like for you to be doing it sort of as a temporary guy? People went to the shows. They weren't sure who they were going to see, although after a while people figured out that Mark really wasn't playing. Did Mark ever actually play a show? Did he play one show? I don't remember what the timeline is. What went on there?
I seem to have the most accurate timeline, although it's kind of funny that, it just so happened that I think if I give it to you chronologically, it would be easier to lay it out. So there I am in the summer of '84, doing what my brother is very famous for, ghost guitar work for Kiss. All of a sudden, it's Paul that reaches out to me. I have no clue what's going on, why I'm called in, but he just asked me to bring a guitar with a Floyd Rose on it because I was very popular then. And I did the job, as everyone knows. No credit on Animalize, but I played on Lonely as the Hunter and a little bit at the end of Murder in High Heels, okay? But right before I leave, Eddie, Paul looks at me. My hair was about shoulder length. I'm not saying I was like, really, crazy rocker looking guy, but it's not like I looked like an accountant. But he says, by the way, don't cut your hair. And he didn't say why. And I looked at him, I was like, okay. No clue. And I didn't really know why Mark wasn't there, except I got this sense that they didn't always love what he was playing, and I knew they used to use other players, like my brother. So then within, I don't know if it was 6 weeks or around then, and I get a call from the Kiss management saying, can you fill in for Mark St. John and go to Europe? The tour is starting at the end of September. I said, of course. And they said it might be for 2 weeks, it might be for 4 weeks. Or 6 weeks, rather, if it's the entire tour. And I'm like, I'm down, So then I'm rehearsing with the guys. There's more to that story. That's for another time. And then I'm off in Europe. The 2 weeks turned into the full tour, Eddie. You know that, okay? Mark wasn't, he was improving, but not to the point where they could fly him to Europe and then insert him into the tour. So I'm definitely, fitting in. I remember comments, Gene would be like, oh, Bruce, great job tonight, or, love your vibrato. And I'm feeling it, you know what I mean? And I was like getting comfortable. Now we're back in America and they're really riding high. You remember Heaven's on Fire was a big hit? You remember that,
sure.
Right? And the tour was really setting up really good. And for whatever reason, and I could never really be sure, I already knew that I deserved the gig or should get the gig or will get the gig. But I also knew Gene and Paul well enough that it was up to them. There's nothing I would say or do other than shut up and do my job, and play the best I could. And they wanted to give Mark a shot, maybe contractually, maybe just because, wow, this is not going to look good. If all of a sudden the guy on the new record, it doesn't even, well, you get what I'm saying. So Mark is touring with us. He comes out on tour, and within that first, his kind of instructions are watch the show, learn the set, and we're going to start inserting you. And I remember him doing the first half of a show. This was kind of when we were on the East Coast. Then second half of the show, and then a full show. Okay, now how hard is that? Two different guitar players playing with Kiss.
That's always been a question of mine, because I know he did one full show, but I had heard that he did a half. So there were actually 2 times where he played one half and you did the other half?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That is incredible.
But they didn't want to try him out completely, but they realized, all right, you just go up to the drum solo, wherever the break was, Eddie, and then I came in. So I was ready to go. Or what if something happened? You know what I mean?
It's like tag team wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So anyway, after the full show, that was it. And I watched it because I was also dressed just in case, I'm ready to go. And I saw Mark play well, but I didn't think he had the tone. He preferred this other amp, like a boogie amp, and I didn't think it sounded right, or what I think they were used to hearing. And then Mark was trying to do some exciting things on stage, which I don't think Gene and Paul were, number one, expecting, and number two, appreciated, if you get what I mean. And, it's pretty easy to read their faces, especially when you've worked with them already. So that was it. They sent them home. I know Mark, It was awkward, but by the way, all during that time when we were touring together, we used to jam backstage. We had very pleasant banter. I mean, at times I used to make a joke years later talking about it. I mean, I could have turned it into the Nancy Carrington. What was the name of the hockey star?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I could have
Tanya Harding.
Him. Yeah, or him. Sabotage me. You know what I mean? Think of it. I mean, our career, the future of our music careers are in the balance right now. How unusual is that? Okay. But anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on Animalize. Yes. The gig was mine already. I had a contract December 7th. Okay. And if you're really knew your Kiss facts, I think Animalize concert was the 8th. You see what I mean? When we filmed it?
Yeah.
In Detroit. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
They wanted to wrap that up before that.
Yeah.
Because they knew they needed a commitment. They needed the new guy. So now I'm the new guy in the band. Okay. But the rest of that tour, now everybody's got to know that's listening to this. It's 1984. There's no internet. How do you get the word out unless you put it out on local news that the guitar player is not Mark St. John or even Ace Frehley or Vinnie Vincent for that matter? You know what I mean? So I was kind of that mystery guy. I've had so many fans through the years tell me, like, I saw you on Animalize. Me and my buddy, we didn't know who it was. We knew it wasn't Ace, but we weren't sure if it was Mark or we couldn't tell,
right.
But it was great, that kind of thing. How funny was that? Which is why, as you started out talking about Asylum, that album was so important to me because there was going to be no more confusion about who is the lead guitar player in Kiss. My face is on the cover. I'm playing all the guitars. I have 3 co-writes. I'm the new guy in the band, even though I was with them for the majority except for the dates I just discussed with you, for the entire Animalize tour.
Yeah, what's interesting when I look at the lineage and when they arrived at you as the guitar player, my take on that is the time of the early 80s was so dominated by the hotshot, super flashy shred guitar players. Everybody wanted their Eddie Van Halen. And Kiss,
yep.
the irony of that to me is that Kiss took swings at that, and we all know that style of playing does not suit Kiss's music, especially the older stuff. But they took swings at it with Vinny and then with Mark, and then sort of didn't like what they were doing, even though those guys, in my opinion, were doing exactly what they probably got hired for, but they didn't really realize that it was just this sort of clashing of, well, we need a guitar hero guy like that, but that style isn't really what Kiss is. And I think, Bruce, when you came in, and I've certainly felt this way, I'm like, okay, here's a guy that gets it. You know the history of Kiss. You're honoring the stuff that Ace did and the stuff that came before you in a respectful way. You're not shredding all over it. And at the same token, you're your own guy with the newer stuff. So to me, beyond the long personal history with them that you had, I think what culminated with Animalize was, in my view as a fan, Kiss really found their footing again, because Animalize was a heavier record where they and the guitar was more shreddy. When you got to Asylum, to me, it was the balance of those things. It was what Kiss always was, more of a rock and roll vibe, still some heavy moments, and down to your playing. Your style of playing was a cross-section of what was needed at that time. So that's why I feel so strongly about the record, because I thought that from a musical sense, it was Kiss finally sort of finding their footing in the 80s.
Yes, and well, I'm really proud, of course, that I had that opportunity, and they still really pushed me, though. You know that. There's still this flashy stuff there that I'm like, oh my God. You know what I mean? There's certain solos that really were still, those guys were always kind of trying to have me play. I'll never forget the call when they knew they were sending Mark home. Paul called me. Of course, this is on tour, so he's calling my hotel room, and he's like, "You got the gig. We know what you can do, and I have to tell you, we want you to be competitive. We want you to do all the styles. All the be very, very varied. We want you to play flashy. We want you to play." But you get what I'm saying. It was really important that I had to be a versatile player for them. Okay, so and I have to say, in addition to that, which is connected to what you were just saying, that in my opinion, Mark, I know why they went with him. They asked Grover Jackson. You know who that guy is. You know, the
Jackson guitarist.
The Jackson guitarist, yeah, who you know, and if you played a Jackson guitar, you were probably one of those, you described them as like a metal shredder type, right? You know, speed player.
Right.
And you know, Vinny played the Jacksons, and they got Mark's name from him. They didn't go to a different kind of list, like a New York Players or whatever. They wanted some hotshot California guy that did the flashy thing. And I remember seeing when they announced that Mark St. John got the gig, and there was an article, and it was actually in Kerrang, and Mark was on like page 24, full page, you know, new guitar player at Kiss, because you know how important that is, right? And I just looked at it, and it talked a little bit about him, mentioned his references, you know, who he admired, and he mentions Alan Holdsworth, who I love Alan Holdsworth, but I also know I can't play like that, and that's not Kiss. You know, I mean, it's just like, you know, that Steve Vai would be wrong in Kiss. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Even though he worked in David Lee Roth, but he played the rock part of what he does. But the truth is, I just read Mark's bio or whatever, and my head is shaking left and right. And it was like, I swear to you, I had a light bulb moment. I said, this is the wrong guy for this band. This guy should not be in Kiss. Kiss is about what you were saying. You know, if you can't do, you know, and have a feel and play a Love Gun or Detroit Rock City and just stick it in that kind of like meat and potatoes garage band rock and roll, you're the wrong guy for the group, you know? And I always had one foot everywhere. I've always felt, why could I play with Grand Funk for 20 years if I wasn't versatile? You know what I mean? A shred guitar player wouldn't fit in that. So it was meant to be. I was very fortunate. And of course, my attitude was so grateful to have that opportunity. Can you imagine? I went from really basically not sure what my next gig was, even though I had a pretty decent resume before that. You know, the Billy Squire record. I don't have to remind you of that. Tale of the Tape that you love, and Meatloaf, and Blackjack with Michael Bolton, and even for Long Island, the Good Rats for a couple of years, you know. But how can you say that you're not going to be on cloud nine to be the new guitar player of Kiss? And there I am in Electric Lady Studios, plugging in and recording music, and even some songs that I co-wrote, 3 songs. You know, it was just a dream come true.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be. So, Bruce, take us into Electric Lady Studio, making this record, because it's credited to being produced by both Paul and Gene and engineered by Dave Whitman, who had a long history even at that point with Kiss.
Yeah,
but
yeah, he did.
The storyline that came out of this, at least for the fans too, people were starting to see, was when Gene was sort of drifting a little bit, and Paul really took the reins of the band, because Gene was starting to be interested in Hollywood and start doing some acting and all that. So here you are, technically the new guy in the band. What was the vibe like in the studio given that backdrop?
Well, there's no doubt that Gene had his sights on Hollywood, and obviously Gene being a very astute businessman, he was, you know, I have to admit, a lot of attention was going that way, and Paul wasn't going to lose sight of the band. Okay, so but there, you know, when you're in the studio, it's not as if, you know, Gene was like completely, you know, missing in action and not involved or not contributing songs. But there is that criticism that is focused towards the band. Might not have been quite as laser focused as Paul Stanley. But that was already happening from Animalize, apparently. So Paul was already set for the, you know, like, this is the way it's going to be, and we're going to get this done. But I ping-ponged between the two of them. Apparently there is a song that both their names are on, and we can get to the tracks later. But the point is, usually Gene writes his songs, Paul writes his songs. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And they pick what they both like or can deal with from each other. I'll put it that way. You know what I mean? They compromise in a way, but certainly my experience at Electric Lady. All right, number one, I'm a Jimi Hendrix fan. He's my favorite guitarist. So even though, you know, Hendrix didn't realize quite the dream of working in that place, he built it. Okay, and his vibe was there. So that was a real thrill for me. And Greenwich Village meant a lot for me growing up in New York. You know that. I mean, all that's like a big deal. So I was thrilled to go every day to the studio, even though I had been there before. But I really did love, you know, the fact that I could be in that studio day after day. Now, a band like Kiss is going to do the lockout. So now you're working and you're working and you're working. And my biggest takeaway from recording that record, because I do know it was during the summer, only because I remember on July 4th, I still was working. And, Gene would never take a day off. Paul would like maybe the weekends off. I was in that studio 21 days in a row. I remember that. And in a way, I joked about it in my mind. I didn't really mind, because why am I going to complain? I just walked into this amazing opportunity of lead guitar player of Kiss. But you get what I'm saying, that, the days that Gene worked with me, Paul might not have been there, you see. So I got ping-pong between the two. And for Eric Carr, once the drums are done, if he wants to be there or not, he doesn't have to, right? Except if they're going to do some background vocals. So I worked my ass off with the songs, and I did feel very much my goal was purely to make sure they both were really happy with the solos. They constantly challenged me, and I was up for it. And that's why, actually, now when I listen to a few of the solos, especially the faster songs, I'm kind of like, oh my God, I don't even know how I played that. You get what I'm saying? But then again, look how many years have gone by, and I can't expect, like an athlete, that I can, you know what I mean, have the same batting average, when I'm in my 60s compared to when I'm, 30. Okay. So it's quite humbling. I got to be honest. It's totally humbling for me to hear it. And then there'll be a solo like Tears Are Falling that I remember so clearly working out with Paul, especially the harmony parts, how it starts. And that solo being something that, has just been so important to my career. So there's so many amazing things. How about just the record starts off with King of the Mountain, which is a really huge song for the Kiss fans of the non-makeup era. You know that. There's just something that is right about it for the Kiss, and the lyrically, then to start out with the thunderous drums from Eric, and then it just is real catchy. Me working with Desmond Child, I knew that Desmond wrote Heaven's on Fire with Paul. I knew what he was capable of, and that was even maybe before his superstardom co-writing with Bon Jovi, but I knew that Desmond was a force that, like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to write with Desmond Child. And that was, what a thrill for me. So everything about the time in New York doing that record was always, it was really a big milestone for me in my life. Really, really big.
King of the Mountain, great opening track, a song. I saw so many shows on that tour. I remember I actually saw you guys do it live once. I was thrilled it was in the set once. It was not a regular in the set, but it was a great song. It's a great opening track on the record. And I loved Eric so much, and I know you did, and so many others did as well. I thought it was great. He had that sort of that opening piece on there. I want to, because time's going so quick here, I want to ask you about the songs. Now, you mentioned you had 3 co-writes on this record. So give me a minute or two on the songs you had a hand in writing, starting with King of the Mountain, which is credited to you, Paul, and Desmond Child. What were your recollections about that one coming together?
Well, I remember, just having the opportunity to write with these guys was brand new for me. You got to remember, I was just a touring guitar player. So I just kind of put together some ideas that I thought would be good for Paul or Gene. I didn't exactly know what their writing process was, and they are very different, both of them. But fortunately, I had what I felt was like a good verse vibe with these chords in A that would maybe entice Paul, and that's exactly what it did. And I remember we wrote it in his apartment. My contribution was largely the verse chords and everything. And then I remember Paul having the moving guitar lines of the chorus. And I'm sure, Desmond was very helpful with certain lyric and melody things. But I have to give Paul a lot of credit for once we got in the studio and fooled around with the drum guitar break kind of thing, that was really, really interesting for that song. So, again, working with Desmond was great. Moving on to Trial by Fire, which would be the next one that appears on the record in order. I did the demo for that on my 4-track, which I still have, which is really exciting. I had to have it repaired. But anyway, I just had some cool chords that I thought was kind of, in my mind, vibe, AC/DC vibe. and played it to Gene, and he was like, I can work with this. Give me a hand, give me a little bit of time. His first demo, and this is kind of a cool scoop for everybody to hear, he was actually calling it Live Fast, Die Young. And I don't know why he changed that, because, Gene always carries around a book of titles and ideas and things, like if he hears something, read something, create something out of nowhere, it's in his book. Okay. So Live Fast, Die Young, Trial by Fire, it's the same thing. Okay. And eventually he wound up turning it into Trial by Fire. And what I really liked about that one is like, wow, Gene actually, I didn't have a melody, but we didn't touch anything about the chords or the arrangement that I handed to him. That was what I wrote on my 4-track with a bass and just a backing drum track, and that became Trial by Fire, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, let me jump, before you go to the last one, let me just jump in on that, because Trial by Fire, to me, is a perfect example of a song. When I mentioned earlier the thing where Kiss sort of finding their comfort zone between the metal and rock worlds, right? To me, there were times Kiss was a metal band. Certainly, Creatures of the Night, it would be more of a metal record. There were times where Kiss was a rock and roll band. There were times where Kiss was a hard rock band, a pop band, a disco band. There's all of that stuff in the catalog. But the comfort zone, the real natural space to me was always that sort of straight up hard rock. And to me, Trial by Fire has a great hook, and it personified it on that record. And I thought that it was probably the best Gene song in a while too. It was just hooky. Cool. It was rock and roll. It had a great feel to it. It had a classic Kiss vibe to it for 1985, which, I don't think they had really had on a song prior to that for a while.
Well, thank you. That makes me feel good about it. But there's another angle there. Check it out. Remember, we were talking about there's still a lot of flashy guitar playing on Asylum, and there's some, melodic playing, which is what I'm most proud of, like Tears Are Falling and things like that. But let's be honest, there's no guitar solo in the song. At the very end, I start fooling around with some rhythmic movement. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. Well, you made up for it. You made up for it on the third one, I'm Alive, which you had a hand in writing, because that was exactly. That showcase for you. And I think, now correct me if I'm wrong, was that one knocking around for a little bit beforehand, because that's credited to you, Paul, and Desmond. What was the history of that song?
I remember I knew they liked the fast stuff because there I was on tour doing Young and Wasted and other up tempo. And by the way, let's face it, Animalize Live. Were we not playing a little too fast?
Oh my gosh!
What the hell was going on? I know. I'm like, please. All right, it's not that hard when you're that age, but I didn't even understand what that was about.
Hey, well, real quick, I got to tell you this. I was watching a 77 Kiss show on YouTube a night or so ago, and then I'm done watching it, and then it took me to a show in Germany of you guys on the Crazy Nights tour, which is a whole nother thing, but it's an hour set, you're opening for someone, Doro introduces you, and everyone was like shot out of a cannon. Like everyone's like sprinting back and forth on the stage and playing at warp speed. And I was like, wow, that's right. That's how you guys used to do it back then. It was crazy.
Yeah. I'm glad we slowed it down a little later on by the time we got to Alive 3, certainly. But yeah, everything was a little too fast there. Well, I had that main theme with the chords that are moving rather quick. And again, I was able to like assimilate like the Borg on Star Trek. I kind of like got what they were doing from the kind of Creatures, Lick It Up to Animalize, you know what I mean? So that that kind of thing. I kind of wrote that and presented it to Paul, and Desmond was there. And I remember originally it also was another song that I think lyrically it wasn't I'm Alive. There was another title for it. I have to find it on it. I know I have a demo of it. But it was called something different. But it was the same, melody basically was happening. But I think it was Desmond and him took a look at what they had, and then they realized, no, let's call it I'm Alive, change the title. But that didn't affect me at all because I wasn't really involved in any way with the lyrics. It was just the music. So I kind of like set the pace for that, and then the rest of it was, let's get riffy. And there it is, this up-tempo song, which was still a part of where they were at, but that's not the that's not the majority of Asylum, as you've noticed. because the three singles that we wind up doing the videos for, Tears Are Falling, Who Wants to Be Lonely, and All Night, as much as I love, King of the Mountain and Trial by Fire and really the entire record, those three songs are just stellar versions of what, especially where Paul was at in '85, because I really think he dialed that in, whatever that was about Kiss and rock and roll and that version of the band. So those songs are timeless, I think.
Yeah, well, I've always been, since day one, partial to Paul's stuff, and this record is no exception. I mean, there's so much great stuff. But Gene, the thing about it was the stuff Gene had on here, I liked a lot, and I thought was really strong. And then, for that vibe and that up-tempo stuff, it's interesting because if you think about this record from the vinyl or cassette days, side one ends with "I'm Alive" and side two opens with "Love's a Deadly Weapon." Both tempo-wise, very aggressive up-tempo songs. So that's an interesting thing to look at as well. So look, we could talk about the songs forever because I really do love the record, but in the time we have left, I want to transition to the tour for this record because that was a bit interesting, and you only toured the US for the album. And now I don't think the band played the Garden on Animalize, but I know for Asylum you played the Garden because I went to it, and I remember afterwards there was a party, if I'm not mistaken, at the Playboy Club. I still have the invite somewhere in my scrapbook. So it was a pretty major thing for Kiss because the band, everyone knows, really was going through a rebuilding process throughout the 80s, starting with Lick It Up and starting to get sales and people to come back and get into the bigger venues. So although I think it's safe to say Asylum, the attendance was hit or miss through a lot of the tour, according to some things that I've read. The Garden was really a big crowning moment to be able to come back and play that, I would think. And for you personally, must have been an amazing thing.
Very much. I mean, when people ask, highlights of my entire career, being a New Yorker and seeing bands like Zeppelin and seeing Hendrix at the Garden, for me to be on the stage at the Garden, absolutely. And the few times that we did things like the Playboy Club or did a celebration, I remember after the Hot in the Shade tour, we went to, you go to like some club in the Garden. There's places that you can go and have a celebration, and that always meant a lot. But I know you touched upon. I can't really put my finger on why the Asylum tour wasn't as well received as Animalize. We used to look at it sometimes as timing. Was that album cover an issue? I remember people talking about that back then. Now it's like pop icon. I see people ripping off that cover and turning it into like horror T-shirts and having fun with the colors and the faces. You get what I mean? Isn't that weird?
Whether or not. What was the deal with the cover? I'm sure you didn't have anything, any say in that. Yes, it is looked at favorably now, but at the time, I remember it wasn't.
Yeah.
I worked in a record store at the time, and I remember it coming in, and we opened the box, and we're like, what? What was do you have any insights on that? And
I do.
Are those actually photos? Are those painted on photos, or is that a painting from the get-go?
I believe that they're actual faces that were then, painted kind of or made to look like ghosty faces or whatever you want to call that. Because there's nothing in the proportion of my face that's wrong. And I'm real good with that. It was Paul's idea. I know that. I felt that Paul, would look at the clothes that we were wearing. Look at the clothes in the video. Over the top. And Paul, being that guy who went to the New York, the high school, was the arts one. You know what I mean? You got to be really, look, this is why he's been very successful as a painter too. He saw an image of like, let's get artsy, I guess. In a way that covers closer to Andy Warhol than anything from rock and roll. You can't look at Judas, it's not a Judas Priest cover. We know that, right?
Did he paint, Bruce? Did he paint it? Now that you think about it, because he painted it,
but I do believe the direction of the lips would have the colors. I just read it on Wikipedia this morning, dude. That I was like, what do people say about Asylum? You know what I mean? And it came up that, and it only connected to me today that the four colors on the lips are actually the same as the solo records, meaning I'm the guitar player, so I had the blue, which would be Ace, right? Paul being the purple, Gene the red, and Eric having the green. Isn't that weird? But they're still kind of they're not exactly the same colors as the Kiss makeup years. How about the streaks of paint going across the cover, which is another iconic thing that gets ripped off from it. But meanwhile, the Asylum font is like a stencil, like Cheap Trick uses, or military. I think it's brilliant looking back at it now. But I swear to you, and I was there. I think at the time there was some head scratching. Hurt us.
Oh yeah.
Did this hurt us? And I don't know. Maybe Paul was way ahead of his time, but people have ripped it off now and use it, and it's so damn identifiable and something that they've used in merchandise.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I remember that very clearly, getting it at the record store and people kind of looking at it and saying, huh? Because, look, if you think about it, it's only like the third record of the band not even wearing makeup. And then you've got this sort of hybrid where it's painted on. Is it makeup? Is it not makeup? There's that going on too. But back to the tour. So, what I remember about the tour from a stage production standpoint, there were those sort of lightning bolt stairs on the side. Talk about performing on that stage, because it's not regarded as one of the classic Kiss stages by any stretch. And also, interestingly, I've never really seen much pro shot video, even on the Kissologies, from the Asylum tour. So talk about performing. Okay. And I think the stage show even got pared down at one point because sales were getting a little soft. So talk about what was going on the road. We got about 5 minutes left.
Okay. It was an ambitious stage. Now, let's give credit to the biggest Kiss sign that was ever used.
That's true.
Okay. So that was the positive, and that, I think, survived. The lightning bolt staircases in bright yellow, super dangerous, okay? The floor actually had the cover or something like it originally, and I knew this I did a big expo in Stockholm years ago, not that long ago, in the last 5 years, I think, and the people there are they love Asylum, and they knew all these details. I learned more that weekend in Stockholm at that expo about Asylum tour and Asylum than I never ever did before. But we had to make some adjustments because the floor was slippery with the faces or whatever it was on the bottom, and then there were too many of those lightning bolts. I think there might have even been another element of it, and they were really dangerous. I remember Eric Carr nearly falling down the stairs. I think there's video of that. He didn't actually fall down, but you could tell he missed the step, and it was just like, oh my God, so we made some changes. Some of it I know was to pare back, but also that just some things just are, maybe on paper they're good, but practically they're dangerous and don't work. Okay. I think the set too, I think we were challenged by the reaction, and we tried songs. Like you said, well, I think I heard King of the Mountain one time live, thank God, but then I didn't hear it again. But this was a problem with my entire career with them, that a new record would come out and they'd test a song or two, and if it didn't go over the way they wanted to, we didn't do it again. You know what I mean? So that was just something that Gene and Paul were pretty guilty of, right or wrong, and it's up to them with their comfort level and what songs from the catalog they want to perform with. But I did really like what we were presenting and everything, but I do feel there was some slight disconnect with the fans or with the reaction compared to the huge growth and excitement with Animalize. Yet this is the record we're talking about. This is the record I get more requests about. This is the record that people want to imitate. And I've seen plenty of photos from this tour that are really impressive, but no video. And I think, Gene kind of was challenged with how he looked, and I think they didn't go out of their way to make some pro video of it. But there is some stuff out there, and I know a guy that I'm trying to put something together to share that's going to look as good as it could look, if you get what I mean, as if there was a pro video from Asylum, from various bootlegs.
Right.
And I'll probably share that when the tour started as an anniversary of the tour actually beginning, okay? But,
yeah.
Wow,
I'll tell you though. I got like 2 minutes and I got to wrap. But was it on that tour? If my memory serves me right, that you guys started doing. Won't Get Fooled Again? Did you do that?
Yes.
That used to make me crazy because although as much as I love the Who, I'm like, Kiss has got 15 records. Why am I hearing a Who or a Zeppelin song? So as fun as it was, that was another thing that jumped out to me about that tour.
Well, what's interesting, we didn't always do it, but it was interesting that all three of them got to sing because I didn't come off as Mr. Lead Singer on stage. Right. I only did I Walk Alone, as you know. But I loved it. I thought it was pretty bold for Paul and I to do. And you kind of gave away something that I want to be able to share in September when the tour started. But the point is, it's going to be interesting, the mixed reaction I get talking about Won't Get Fooled Again, because it was in the set. Not every night, but it was in the set. And that is a little bit odd. I understand that with all the catalog we have.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's to me, it's a record that holds up tremendously well. I know a lot of people lean towards Revenge, which was also a huge record for you. But if gun to my head, when I'm asked with the question of the best, my favorite of the non-makeup records, I gravitate towards this record because I just think it's where all the Kiss worlds sort of converged, where they got you in there. You knew the drill. You had the best balance and the best approach to playing. I think since Ace was in the band, you were the best guy. And I just think that material-wise, it all came together. And obviously, we can't not mention this was the heyday of MTV, and this thing was so driven by MTV, more so than radio. I mean, the Tears Are Falling video on the request shows every day. I think that was a big part of it, and that was the sweet spot for MTV at that time, too.
Absolutely. And yours truly taking like a shower as if I'm like some hair model or something in it. So in conclusion, Eddie, look, the record I'm really proud of. The videos, I think, were all great, all three of those. And those songs are really important for my history. The tour, a little bit of a disappointment, but overall, what Asylum represents for many of the non-native Kiss fans is a huge, it's just a huge highlight. So I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, as you should be. It really is a great record, and I still listen to it and enjoy it, and brings back great memories of our dear friend Eric Carr, whose performance is stellar on it, and I still miss like it was yesterday. Yep. So,
and our friend Chris Jericho is pretty obsessed with it too. As you noticed.
Yeah, no doubt. Bruce,
he's going to be delving into it, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure. National holiday today for Jericho. So, anyway, it's always great to talk to you. I mean, we could talk for hours, and we will. I'm going to get out to Vegas where you're living soon, and we're going to. Sure. I want to do a whole show with you, and it's always great to have you on to share your stories about what's a really important period of Kiss for a lot of people, myself included. Best to your family, Bruce. Thanks, and everybody, crank up Asylum today. 35 years later, enjoy.